taught to be responsible. My dad, while he was not ever hyper like me, my dad was not the most responsible person. He was laid back, whatever comes, don't worry about it. And there's a good side to that, but there's also, sometimes you have things that come upon you that you could have avoided. And so here's the thing, that's my weakness. If your weakness is people and loving and the more social aspect of it, you need to understand that may be your weakness. That's not an excuse. With me, this is an excuse, because here's the thing. These are tied to the blessings of your children and the blessings of your grandchildren. So deal with your weakness, or you endanger your parenting role and what you're going to pass on to your kids.
And kind of along with that, most of the time your kids are not going to come up and say, well, you are not responsible in this area. They're not going to tell the parent that. But a lot of times when they go to junior high camp especially, or senior high camp, that's what our counselors hear in the cabins is, well, why should I have to do this? My parents don't. They may not say that to you, but they see it. You're not hiding it from them. They know.
Okay, so we got well-rounded kids are relational, well-rounded kids are responsible, then finally well-rounded kids are respectful. And he says, so you want to do this so that your children and their children after them may fear the Lord your God. The idea, and again, we'll talk more about this, but what's the idea of fearing God? Well, it's the idea of responsibility. Whenever I was growing up, I was afraid of my dad, especially when I was little. Whenever I got a little bit older, I was afraid of some of my teachers. Mr. Elliott, our principal, really afraid of Mr. Elliott. Would walk in line whenever Mr. Elliott was substituting or whenever he was around. I was afraid to a certain extent of the police. And I want you to know, in every case, when you think about that, the fear of my dad, the fear of my teachers, and the fear of the police, to the extent that I allowed that fear to motivate me, I was blessed. To the extent that I decided I'm going to disrespect them and not fear them, I got into problems. And so as we talk about that, and again, here's what God is calling you as a parent to do, is to teach them to make sure that they are respecting authority. And it's going to start with you. Now then, as we move into that, you go, okay, here's my role. I got to teach them to re-relation. I got to teach them to love God. I got to teach them to be responsible so that they'll obey God and do the things that they should. I need to make sure that I'm teaching them to be respectful to where they respect authority. They fear God and they fear the authorities, which moves you in a direction of doing the right thing. How do I do that? And if you look in Deuteronomy chapter 6, there's some things that you see. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not turn from it. So there's this training. Moses is saying, hey, you guys pass this on to your kids and your grandkids. Obviously, he's looking at kids in a young environment. So you start training them early. And one of the things I would suggest to parents, to you guys, if you have kids, your training with your kids starts much earlier than what you've ever imagined. For instance, respect for authority. When does that start? What would you think? Pardon me? It really does start in infancy. We really don't recognize that sometimes. One of the most respectful people in our culture, as far as with authority, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, are the Amish. And the Amish believe that respect for authority starts when a baby is 3 to 6 months old. That early. Now, again, I'm not saying become Amish. What I'm saying is that there's this idea of they do have a very strong tradition of getting their kids to embrace their values. And while some leave, most stay. So here's the thing, we've got to train them up. So how do you train them? And again, Deuteronomy 6 gives us insight to how we do that.
The first one is, I help by having these truths in my heart. Deuteronomy 6:7 said, these commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. And I think, just kind of what we were saying a while ago, if we don't have the truth in our hearts, how are we going to convey that to our children? We're not.
Now, and again, you don't have to be perfect.
Right.
But these things that we're talking about today, they have to be things that you're either dealing with, and you are dealing with them and modeling them as a strength, or you're modeling them in honest weakness. You see, your kids will learn from you in two ways when you communicate. You can be, if you're good, you can go, man, this is something I'm strong at, and they'll see that. If you try to claim strength and you're weak, they will shut you down. They have hypocrisy detectors that start forming really early in life. They'll shut you down. But what a kid will do is that they'll allow you to go, man, this is something I'm not good at. One of the most powerful times of my dad's instruction, I was older. I wasn't young, but later in life, he said, man, son, I wish I would have taught you how to be more, it was an area of responsibility. And he goes, I never did that, and I wish I would have. I didn't do it because I wasn't good at it, and I wish I'd have been more serious about, dealing with it and helping you with it, because I know it's going to be a problem for you. And I remember just going, wow, my dad, I was blown away that he was acknowledging weakness, but I also felt very, very compelled to respond to him. He wasn't trying to act hypocritical. It motivated me. But I could tell it came from his heart. These can't just be things that are just dictatorial kind of commands or laws. These are principles that have to inhabit your heart. Proverbs 37:31 says, the teachings of his God are in his heart. His feet do not slip. What's the idea of slipping? A lack of stability, a lack of consistency. If these aren't in your heart, if you don't allow these today for God to go past just some guy well, this is just interesting information. And I hope there is some interesting information, but I hope that you see more that there's scripture and there's biblical principle and there's the edict of God and the longing of God to bless us, to where these things go into your heart and where you go, man, this is down deep. I can't do anything but adhere to these concepts and these principles. So the first thing, if you're going to help them to be well-rounded, is you have to have these teachings in your heart. That's what Deuteronomy says.
And
Next.
The second one is, I help by having these truths on my lips. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. That was one of my favorite verses when the kids were growing up, and even now with my grandkids. But we talk about what we value, don't we? And I think if you just go back and you look at your conversations with your kids, or in general, what do you talk about most of the time? Is going to help you see, is it about God, or is it about sports? What is it that I value? Is it about my job? Is it about what I'm attaining, what I'm getting? Is it about my house? Is it about my decor? What is it about? Because we talk about what we value. And so what does that say if you're not talking about God to your children? It's saying you don't value God as much as you value all these other things. So that's one of the things and we'll get into this more specifically when we talk about it, but that's one of the things that's huge. I think huge, that you need to make sure you're talking to your kids about God consistently every day.
And it may not be so overt that but to where you're just teaching these concepts. If you notice, there's not a limited area of instruction. It's like, okay, we're in church. This is our chance. And for many of you, that's kind of what we go, I'm in a church event. This is something that he says, now this has got to transcend this idea of four walls. Your parenting is designed to be a constant 24/7 thing. And there are opportunities to reinforce the relational, the respectful, the responsible concepts of Deuteronomy chapter 6 everywhere you go. In anything that you're involved in. We talk about sports a lot not being a god, but if your kids are in sports, there's incredible opportunity to teach them about relationship, the way that God calls them to be loving. Because in sports, you love your team and you hate the enemy. Not exactly what Jesus calls them to. In sports, doing the right thing can be superseded by wanting to be the star of the team. And being responsible is realizing you're a part of a team. So they're everywhere you go, in every situation, there's a chance for you to talk to them about it, and also to inject God in that. In a very honest way, to where they're going, oh, these are the principles of God that wants you to follow. But you've got to make sure that it's in your heart. You can't be some raving lunatic who's yelling at the referee and, moron, idiot, fool. And then you're going to talk to them about being responsible and relational.
One of the things that was kind of cool this weekend while we were away in Florida, some of our teens had never seen the ocean, and Ashley, I think she put a video up of it. And I don't remember who it was. Was it J-Tone and Antoine? First time they'd ever seen the ocean. And as she was videoing them walking, I heard her say, when they saw it, their eyes, you could just see it on their face. And she was like, isn't God good? Look at what he created. And I started crying because I'm like, that's what I used to say to her. It's cool. Just that, when you talk to your kids about stuff like that, they hear you.
You see, we talk about what we value, and when we talk, we transfer what we value. Look around, and that's the truth. So he says, listen, this has got to be on your hearts, but it can't stop there. Well, I'm just not much of a talker. Then you're not much of a transferer. So you help your child. You can help them be well-rounded by having it in your heart, and then you can have it by having on your lips. The third thing, you can help by having this truth in my home. You know, he says, talk about them when you're at home, sit around, but notice beyond that. He says, write these on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. What is that about? What is that you're going? It's about transference. It's about something that is so obviously important that they can't hear you or they can't see their environment they live in and not notice that there's something distinctly different about you and where they live and there and where others live. You guys, go ahead.
I was just thinking, you know, we do this with everything else that matters in our life. You know, if you go into your teenager's room and they're in sports, what's in their room on the walls? Medals, ribbons, you know, all kinds of stuff like that.
Do they still have pictures of like the guys and girls, you know, like whenever I was growing up, you know, all the girls had David Cassidy all over their walls. I grew to hate him. You know, and then, you know what I'm saying?
Bo Derek.
No, I didn't have Bo Derek. I wanted to have Bo Derek. Actually, it was Farrah Fawcett, right?
Farrah
Yeah,
Fawcett,
that's right.
that's it.
No, my mom wouldn't let me have that, okay? So.
But anyway.
And then I met you,
we
and
do
I didn't
that
need
thing-
her anyway.
We do that with things that matter, you know, and even as parents, you know, if you go into your house, you have pictures of your kids up, don't you, on the wall, because they matter to you, or pictures of family, you know. You put things up that matter to you.
And again, with that, we're talking about subtleties here. And probably if we were to really ask God, what's this all about? He would say, this is all about having it in your heart. And these next things are just a reflection of whether they're in your heart or not. The consistency of which you see these things are a indication of the depth of which these things, the teachings of God have went into your heart. And again, you know, but he says, listen, the opportunity, you know, with little plaques, when you give your kids, you know, things, gifts. You know, for my grandkids, you know, I would buy them when Jack went to school. The first time Jackson, when he went to his, was it kindergarten or first grade? I can't remember. I got him some dog tags. And I still have him in my phone under the name that I put on the dog tags. It was Jack Attack. And I gave them to him, and we talked before. I said, Jack, why did I give you these as you go to school? And he said, because I'm going in there to attack. And I said, he's 5 years old. I said, right, what are you going to do? She goes, I'm going in there for God, and I'm going on a mission. I said, exactly. We talked about that before. I said, man, when you go in, and I talked about his mission, he's attacked, but I never got him dog tags. What's the dog tag? It's the writing on the door frame. It's putting on the wrist. It's the Christian jewelry that, you know, that you buy them for $3 and they lose in 3 weeks, right? But for 3 weeks, it mattered, and it mattered that you got it for him and your gift. So there's all kinds of subtle things. And I'm not talking about if you walk into our homes or our kids' homes, you didn't find this sort of like this environment that was churchy and, you know, kind of weird. But you did find cool stuff. I mean, and again, the music that they listen to, you know, I've never liked rap, and particularly not you know, it's not the style that I grew up around. Rap was non-existent when I was growing up. But I've come to love rap because of some of the new rap artists who are reflecting honest Christian values in a way that's so transparent that I go, man, it's awesome stuff. So if you came into my house now, I know if my kids were, you know, teenagers, I'd be buying them CDs like that. Whenever Ashley, the first time I heard Francis Chan's daughter's CD, what's it called, Ashley, Carrie? What is it? Rachel Chan's. Anyway, I heard some of the songs. Carrie played them for me, and I immediately went and got copies for Hattie and for Kennedy. There's a lot of incredible value and, I mean, just spiritual teachings that are subtle, but subtlety repeated becomes strength. That's the kind of thing that you help with by just going, man, I'm going to have this in my house. I'm going to have this, you know, visible.
And just along with that, God never designed the schoolhouse or the church house to be your child's primary place of learning. That's supposed to be your house. And, you know, a lot of times I've heard parents say, I don't know what they're teaching them up there in class because my kids don't even know the books of the Bible. And I'm like, really? Do you know them? Have you been trying to teach them to them? Well, no, I don't really know that song. Well, you need to learn it because you're with your children a lot more than they are. They're with them 1.5, maybe 2 hours, depending on who's preaching that day. So you have a lot more time with them than the teachers do. So it's your responsibility to be teaching them at home also.
And then the final thing, as far as how do we help our kids how do we help them knock the edges off of their life to where they're more well-rounded? I can help them by having these truths in my life. And this is a broad thing, I think, that we're going, what does that look like? Well, it's kind of a sandwich that we're talking about. Have them in your heart, have them in your life. We're talking about in a visible way for you. Deuteronomy 6:1-3, these are the commands, decrees, and the laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you're crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you and your children after them may fear the Lord, fear for the Lord. Hear, O Israel, and be careful to obey so that it may go well with you. So there's this idea that when my kids look at me, they need to see a life that is well-rounded. And not only well-rounded, but well-saturated with the things of God. And quite frankly, if you come here and you're thinking, I'll find 3 steps and I'll tell them what they need to do and things will be great, you're going to miss it. One of the most heartbreaking things of ministry for me is to watch over years, to watch numerous kids get in trouble. Anything from literally going to jail to losing their marriage. And to have the parents being so upset about it, but knowing that the parents in previous months and years did not take seriously the things that they were taught. And honestly, to where I could look and go, I told a lady one time, I said, listen, you had better deal with this, or your kids are going to be in deep trouble. Your kids are going to be in jail. Your boys are going to be in jail. And your daughter's going to be in trouble. And the daughter never went to jail. All 3 of her boys did. And her daughter is roughly Ashley's age, and I think has 4 or 5 kids by 4 or 5 different dads. And the problem wasn't that there wasn't teaching. The problem was there wasn't the adopting of what we're talking about as an individual. The greatest thing that you can do for your kids to be well-rounded is to make sure that you are. To where in their life they don't see this. And guys, you can go, understand, they can deal with honest weakness with you. Honest weakness. But it still doesn't change the fact that they need a good example. So just remember, show and tell is a powerful teaching technique. It's what Luke said Jesus did, and he wrote about it. He says, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to give an account of all the things that Jesus began to teach and do. Do and teach. Remember Timothy, Paul to Timothy, watch your life and doctrine closely. Watch what you teach. Watch how you live. If you do, you'll save yourself and your hearers. Today, that audience that we're talking about is your kids. So it's show and tell has always been powerful. So the question then as we close this first session out, why worry about having well-rounded kids? Well, let's read Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 20-25. The next time your child asks, what do these requirements and regulations and rules that God, our God, has commanded mean? Tell your child, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and God powerfully intervened and got us out of that country. We stood there and watched as God delivered miraculous signs, great wonders, and evil visitations on Egypt, on Pharaoh and his household. He pulled us out of there so he could bring us here and give us the land he so solemnly promised to our ancestors. That's why God commanded us to follow all these rules, so that we would live reverently before God, our God, as he gives us this good life, keeping us alive for a long time to come. It will be a set right and put together life for us if we make sure that we do this entire commandment in the presence of God, our God, just as he commanded us to do. Here's the thing, he says, why does this matter? Because it's about the blessing of your kids. And guys, I know I don't question any of us. Do we want our children to be blessed? What I question is, do we want them to be blessed enough to be and do with our children what God would ask us to do? So as we talk about that, we'll kind of be going over this repetitively enough to where you go, well, I want a well-rounded kid. What's that mean? I want a kid who is relational, he knows how to love. I want a kid that is respectful, he fears and understands authority. I want a kid who's responsible, who obeys and does the right things in his life. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this morning. Thanks for a group of parents that love you and, Father, love each other and, Father, love their kids. I pray that we will understand that love, quite frankly, is not, it motivates us, but it doesn't necessarily inform us. I know some horrible husbands who really do love their wives. They're just clueless as to what that looks like practically. I know some parents who have loved their kids emotionally and really do want what's best for them, but that love that motivates them and to want something doesn't inform them. Father, your word informs us, and our love for you motivates us to do what your word says. So help the love that we have for our children to motivate us, and Father, and the love that we have for you. Help it to motivate us. Help us to let it do what Paul said it did to him, that it compelled him, that it pushed him onward to do the things that we need to, trusting that in doing those things, the God that loves us will bless the kids that we love. Father, we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys, you can take a break. You can get a refill.